Hello there folks, and welcome again to another tale from the wood library. Well, as you can see here, we've got a bit of a chunky old knife block. We've had this in the family for probably 20 plus years. It's served very well, but as it happens, you don't always use all the knives in there. This is a very handy one, a serrated edge knife. Use that all the time for cutting bread and tomatoes and whatnot. Very handy. You'll also find that some of these things, like this sort of fork, I think for skewering large pieces of meat, never been used. So we of course have a favourite knife, and this is a completely different brand, but it seems to work better. But it's sitting around on the bench top pretty much all the time and is a bit dangerous. So I thought, why not make a little sheath that then can be attached to the side of the block, as you can see there, just using some cheap pine offcuts that you can see here. So the first job really is to tidy up these two bits of scrap wood and use the planer thicknesser to thin them down a little bit, just so that the addition on the right hand side of the block isn't too chunky, and then we'll reinstate it. So I'm using my trusty Ryobi thicknesser here. As I say, it's pretty cheap, nasty piece of timber, but once I've scraped it a little bit cleaner, we can reduce it down to about half its thickness. It's still got a couple of nail holes in it where obviously it's been nailed into another piece of timber, so I've cleaned it up. So I've got to be pretty careful when I choose it to have a piece on the outside facing side that isn't too damaged. Then it's a simple matter of drawing simply around the edge of the knife block and then trimming the bits of pine down to pretty much fit fairly close. Because this is fairly soft wood, I'm not too worried about getting a precise cut. It'll just be a couple of millimeters over the size, and then I can file it down, chisel it down, or sand it down, or a combination of everything. So now I'm making just a fairly rough sketch around, and then I thought it'd be a good idea to grab one of these whiteboard markers in order to highlight the edges, because when you're using a router to try and cut the sort of recess for the knife blade, it's actually very hard to see where you're going. So the black edges there work quite well with the router, and as you can see, it's reasonably easily done. And then I tidied it up a little bit with a chisel, as you can see here, and of course a little bit of sanding just to get rid of any sort of notches in the timber that would otherwise catch the blade when it's slid in. Then with a little bit of trepidation, I slid the entire knife block through the sanders. It's a big chunk of wood, just to flatten one side so that we could get a reasonably clean adhesion using the wood glue here on the right hand side of the knife block. So that seemed to work quite well, and I just put it on top there and then clamped it in place, left it overnight, and decided that I'll be able to come back the next day and clean it up a little bit, get all the edges nicely sanded down to fit. Whoops. And then we use the third clamp on the bottom, clamp it up nice and tight, clean up some of the glue, and then the next day when it's nice and rigid, get the old electric planer onto it, chisel off the worst bits of it, and then get the trusty Ryobi sander into action here, as you can see. So it came up quite nicely, and actually the old timber that has kind of lost some of its colour there began to look quite nice, sort of much newer pine as I was stripping off the oil and the stains. And here's the finished sanded block. Needs a couple of coats of water-based varnish, and then to finish off I put some little furniture feet on it to keep it off the deck. The new knife fits in beautifully, and there you have it. Thanks very much for watching.